Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the third annual partnership between the European Parliament's Liaison Office in Washington, D.C. and the USC School of Cinematic Arts. We come together once a year to highlight one of the finalists of the European Parliament's LUX Audience Award. And specifically today, we're going to be joined by Jan Komasa, the director of LUX Audience Award finalist Corpus Christi, which I hope everyone had a chance to watch earlier this week. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Joseph Dunn, the director of the European Parliament office in Washington, D.C. And I'll let Joe take it from here. Hi, Joe.
Thank you, Jan. Yes, I'm
Hello,
the
everybody.
director of the Parliament office in Washington, D.C. It's one of the best jobs in town. So thank you very much for introducing me, Alex. Our main function is to connect the European Parliament and the US Congress. That's why we were established 10 years ago. But of course, we also do other things. And I think outreach and cultural outreach especially is very important. And we have found this collaboration with the USC School of Cinematic Arts to be fantastic. As Alex just said, this is the third year, and each time we've been able to have the director of the film and a contribution from a member of the European Parliament. So in this case, we're very happy that we have a Polish member of the European Parliament, Mr. Tomasz Frankowski. He's a member, leading member of our Committee on Culture, which is the parliamentary committee which had the idea of inventing the prize. It used to be called the LUX Prize, and it's now called the LUX Audience Award. The Parliament and the European Union tries to support cinematic production in this way. They help with, I think, the distribution principally and add subtitling in different languages. And I'd be interested in hearing from Jan later what he thinks or how he thinks the award might have helped him in making this stunning film, and what the European Parliament perhaps could think of, or what further help we could give to European cinema going forward. So I don't want to hold up the discussion, which I'm really looking forward to. It's a very impressive film, and I'll hand over to our MEP, Mr. Frankowski, who is a friend of the United States, who played football here in Chicago, as you will hear, and I think has good words to say about the film. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure to be here with you all for this singular event with friends from both sides of the Atlantic, spanning from Warsaw to Brussels to Washington, D.C. and to Los Angeles. The European Union and the United States are first and foremost united by history, common democratic values, and the protection of fundamental high rights. Today, it is critical to support EU ties and remind ourselves and the entire world the importance of supporting democracy, the rule of law, and free societies where the arts can freely be expression of thoughts of their citizens. The European Parliament believes in the transatlantic partnerships. This is also manifested with our only liaison office outside the European continent. Our office in Washington, D.C. focused since 2009 on building ties between us European Parliament members and our counterparts at the US Congress. My pleasure of being here with you today, it is also due to the fact that this feels like I'm reconnecting with my many friends all over the United States, especially those in Chicago, where I spent a fantastic year of my previous life as an international soccer player. So allow me to say, let's go Chicago Fire. Back to the business though. As you may know, I am a member of the Culture and Education Committee in the European Parliament here. One of our important annual moments here at the European Parliament is the European LUX Audience Award, our very own annual cinematographic prize highlighting celebrating and supporting European films that speak about of our Europe and European soul. What an incredible platform cinema is for debate and reflection not just on Europe, but on values that transcend all boundaries and distances. Our European-USA transatlantic partnership does not only come alive in matters of global trade and security, but also through the celebration of the universal language of the arts, including, of course, cinema. Please allow me to stress one incredibly important and unfortunately still topical point in many places around the world, including here in Europe. It is our duty to support freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom in all its forms. Cinema remains one of our strongest tools in this important fight. My colleagues in Washington, D.C. have told me what a great reception Corpus Christi has had in the United States. I warmly salute Jan Komasa, director of Corpus Christi and fellow Polish compatriot. It comes as no surprise as we here at the European Parliament have chosen this film among the LUX Audience Award 2021 finalists. Jan's film tells the struggle of a 20-year-old young man who utilized his out-of-the-ordinary life experience to be actively involved in the community. This movie demonstrates how filmmaking can be such a consciousness-raising force. I hope you enjoyed this film as much as I did, and thanks to Jan's work, also got a historical and cultural insight of my country, Poland. The COVID-19 pandemic has hit the creative and cinema industry, but we are working hard to bring all people back to the theaters and enjoy cinema again as we know it. I wish you a good discussion and look forward to come and visit the United States soon. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Jan, for joining us. Joe, thank you for all of your kind words. This is exciting. We were going to have you on campus, and it didn't work out last year. So I'm really glad that we can do something with you now. As everyone out there may know, Corpus Christi was nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars last year, and it's really a privilege to have been able to share it with everyone again. So thank you, Jan. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. At last, I have the privilege to finally through via Zoom right now. But actually, yes, you're right. Yeah, I almost made it for the screening last year due to some crazy medical conditions. I couldn't, unfortunately. This year, again, pandemic, which we might call a medical condition as well, of some sort. But at the same time, combining it with Lux Prize, it's a huge privilege because I think Lux Prize in a way reflects what European Union stands for and was founded for, which is I think belonging, and the belonging, being together, and Corpus Christi was meant to be a film about belonging. I think it has twice as much of an impact, I think, that we meet, and thank you for it. I take it as a great privilege.
I just want to quickly mention to the people watching that if you want to ask a question, just type it up in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and after we've been talking for a bit, we'll start to welcome you into the conversation as well. So just use the Q&A box, and I guess, yeah, well, let's start with really where this began, because people may or may not know that there is some like real history of someone impersonating a priest. It's not, this film isn't a direct adaptation of that, but I am curious to know the things that you were reading about that inspired this story.
Yeah, well, yeah, it all started with an article. The article was written by, back then, a journalist, Mateusz Pacewicz, who researched cases of people impersonating priests in Poland, which, funny enough, I learned is not a rare phenomenon. Yes, it kind of it calls for some kind of dissertation, or I don't know, a thesis, or but in a way, you know, it struck me as symbolic, especially in Poland, since Poland has a huge chunk of population is religious and Roman Catholic way. So Mateusz researched some of these cases, and he compiled them into one storyline, and then decided to make a film, approached by another producer, a friend of mine. Once they got the first, or one of the earliest drafts, they sent it to me, and I read it. I really liked it. I really liked what came, like the anecdotal force behind the pretty well-known concept of somebody impersonating a priest or a person of faith, right? We had Sister Act, let's say, with Whoopi Goldberg. So, but it's, and at the same time, you know, reading this, knowing it's not a comedy. So it was kind of striking, like you can have an anecdotal arc and a pretty profound impact stemming from the fact that this particular person really wants to be embedded in a community and lead it for a while, at least to feel that he thinks he might contribute, but at the same time feel loved and accepted. So, and we started to work on it, and it went smoothly. Usually I work extensively with research. This time I decided not to reach out to some of the characters from the original article. You know, I felt it's all there. It's already there in the script. I don't need to I was researching the church, researching more ceremonies, church, this particular community. We went to up to mountain region in Poland, also, you know, correctional facilities somewhere, to know how these boys react and what are the group dynamics within that community. So yeah, so that was basically I was approached as a director, and here with a very solid script already, and obviously I came up with my input, but it was done beautifully by the scriptwriter and producer, both.
I'm curious if you, even though you didn't want to overly research it, if you did get a sense of what motivates the real people to impersonate priests. I mean, the Sister Act counter example in cinema is one where, you know, sort of like she needs to flee for her life and finds, you know, that this is a safe haven. But you chose to have your protagonist actually want to be a priest, and then found himself in happenstance in this situation where the lie sort of takes shape and he actually gets this opportunity. So I'm curious if you got a sense of why people do it.
Well, yeah, well, you know, the original case or cases had this sense of fleeing as well, but this element of wanting to contribute spiritually to the community took over at some point. And in the film, I felt like, okay, you know, this is a guy who has to start from the scratch, having, like, he's 21, he just left the facility, juvenile detention, so he has to face the reality, which is harsh because people his age usually study already, and you know, the train left the station for him basically, and so he is, if there is a social ladder, and we all know there is one, he is scrambling, he's at the bottom of it, and he knows it. He knows it. He sees his fate watching other boys from the facility working at the sawmill, and decides not to, decides, well, that's the funny thing, because we were working on it, until the very first day of shooting. Philosophically, there is a moment in the film between our character deciding not to take part in this rehabilitation program at the sawmill and lying. There's this, I would say, 6 or 7 minutes in which he doesn't really know what to do with himself. So it's pretty tricky. I feel uncomfortable as director when I'm in this area. I'd rather better know what my character wants to do. But it was kind of tempting because, we tried different options. What if it was his plan to fake and from the get-go? But then it was all too obvious. What if it was a sheer coincidence, like in real life? So we decided to go after the serendipity of this whole situation, which is he wanted to do it, but it wasn't his plan. That was the difference between the desire and a plan. And once we were able to differentiate it, the whole film made sense. And that's how we started to work on structuring this particular first 30-minute sequence emotionally. I was struggling. Once he's already a priest, it's so much easier because he has a goal. But before, it's, I was looking for it really until the first day of shooting. I remember the moment when we finally got it, and and that was very revealing. For me, I had the goal.
I find one of the really phenomenal screenwriting accomplishments here is that, the terror that you as the audience feel when he gets up to deliver his first sermon. And you're like, what's going to come out of his mouth? I mean, there's obviously the ritual side of it that, you can sort of assume he's sort of got the muscle memory of, and he can look other stuff up, but really having to come up with original thought that's going to sell this persona to the town really does leave you in suspense. And then you come up with some very moving, I think, discussions that he's making that obviously allow us to really understand psychologically where he's at and how that's translated to how he wants to help the people in the town. That must have been incredibly difficult to come up with. I mean, the things that would both read as a sort of novice sermon writer with someone who's got something to say, and that could be believed in this situation. So tell us a little bit.
Yes, totally. Well, it was one of the hardest parts in the film, because not only you have to convince characters in the film that he can do it, but also the viewer has to be convinced that they are convinced. So the viewer has to believe it actually might have happened. So yes, it was tough, but I would say the antidote and the only way we found was simplicity, which is pretty revealing. Once you're there, he's not a very a super literate person. He's not a philosopher, but he's down to earth. He knows life. He broke all the 10 commandments, don't kill included. So he has been there and he knows life, and that's why it gives him, so I would say, even superpower of ultra knowledge. That's why probably when there's a scene of confession, he knows what to say, and he he's okay. Like he is not surprised by anybody's sin. So, you know, in terms of sermons as well, this first sermon is basically staged using pauses and silences and a proper tempo. I think that was what was missing before in this particular church. People they weren't listening, and because he says so little, he makes them listen to the silence, and he says silence is important. Like it's good to be silent for a while, and that's okay. And it's pretty revealing, the simplicity of it, the authenticity of our main character. Yes, he's young, he's a novice, but at the same time it's his superpower, and that's why he's given credit for whatever he's doing by people in a village who are significantly usually, and in real life as well, older. So he comes out sort of, not only they rather treat him as a struggling young priest rather than somebody who doesn't know how to run sermons.
Sure.
And so yes, so I think that works. And once Bartosz Bielenia, the main character, got on stage, I decided to be as close as possible to his amazing eyes. So we're dwelling a bit more on in the moment, watching his gaze and piercing, you know, his eyes and bluish, and he can easily switch from angel mode to the demon mode in the film. So I felt this is the strength of this character, and I don't have to move my camera too much.
I want to talk about his performance, but before we get to that, I did want to explore this idea of the ways in which the church are able to like interact with community these days. You know, I grew up part of my life in Italy, and there's a lot of obviously a sort of decline in the youth sector of going to mass, and so when you see, you know, a priest come in and deliver a sermon like this, you're like, oh, okay, like I would go to that. You know,
yeah, totally.
A renewed vigor in terms of the message that's being delivered. And I'm curious if you know, how much of that was a commentary on the church versus a commentary on the character for you.
Yeah, well, it's a very interesting distinction you're making here. I think, you know, obviously the church is calling for some kind of rejuvenation, renewal. Obviously, it's there's a whole debate. This, you know, I can hear from the press here in Poland, but there's a debate about Pope Francis, and what he's doing with the church and the believers, and people who are discarding it because it's too edgy. And there's a lot of like this, there's this schism feeling, especially in Poland, among some circles, more orthodox and more leaning towards Jean-Paul II. And so you know, somebody told me after watching this Corpus Christi that the main character Daniel from our film is more like a revolutionary, like somebody who by like pulling the curtain down and making it more down to earth, more humane, more timid, more normal, it is in and of itself revealing for many people. It's new. It totally goes, like people buy it. Maybe they're not comfortable with it because it's unceremonial, but at the same time it works. And he is direct and directly tackles their problems, naming them, and saying it's okay, like, you know, everybody's a sinner, don't worry. And it's, you know, it's he sort of destructuralizes the whole church. Somehow he makes it benign and regular, and for people in the village, in our film, it's like a revolution. Nobody talked to them before like this, and that's why they follow him. So yes, in a way, yes, this is probably in line with the critique of this orthodox, solid, cemented way of how the church is being run by this very tough structure that coalesced around Vatican, and then it was so solid and rock solid that it was almost impossible for people with, I would say, more visceral vision to come up with something much more humane and lively and maybe spiritually revealing and healing also, helpful. So yes, I think, you know, there is a certain amount of take on the division in the overall church and how church is being perceived nowadays, especially. But there's also, I think, in terms of the character, he finds his own way, because the only thing he knows is how to sort of be a nobody within a group. If there's this pre-assumption of him being at the juvenile detention for 6 years prior to when the film starts, and so the only thing he knows, he grew into being a nobody, we called it, even in harsher terms, we called it he felt like a scoundrel, and he felt almost comfortable being one, like somebody with a broken spine bone. And then somehow through fakery, he is healing himself and becoming somebody, at least, even though it's a fake identity. But maybe it's some kind of a psychotherapy therapy. Also, it has this quality of organically healing yourself and living a borrowed life for a few months before you stand on your own feet firmly. So yes, it has both angles, like the church, the bigger angle, and the more subjective character angle.
Another story point that I thought was incredibly nuanced and important, I think, was when you actually reveal to us towards the end that the widow feels that there may have been, that, you know, we've been sort of on this journey thinking that this man was completely innocent of what happened in the accident, that, you know, we're sort of led to think the students might have been drunk and, you know, partying and whatnot, and there was this great injustice. But that at the end, there is a nuance there, that she thinks that there was, you know, some guilt on her part, some rage that he left in anger, and, you know, all of that. And it's such a beautiful moment, because you realize, like, you know, we saw this from one side, we saw it from his side, now we're seeing it from her side, and really there's no like perfect, you know, understanding of what really happened. Tell us about including that scene, because it's, you know, it does come right at the end, and it kind of puts everything we've learned about that accident into a different perspective.
totally. It's funny that you bring it up, because it was one of my ideas to input it by the end of the film, to plant a seed of doubt whether it was all worth it or not. So yes, and we were actually writing the scene. We were shooting it by the 20th day of shooting, no, 20th of 30 of 30 days. So it was closer to the end, and that's why during 20 days of shooting, I grew more and more anxious about the scene, knowing, well, yes, watching how it goes as a director, and putting up all the scenes together, suddenly I realized, yes, this scene is getting more and more important, even more than it was just in the script. In the script, it was just another long dialogue scene in which characters are confronted with some sort of an issue they're trying to address. And here, I realized it will be very powerful, because it will, as you said, it will reverse everything we've learned and we build up to this particular moment. And by the very end, while rehearsing with actors, I was, by the way, I'm sure you know this, but for those of you who know the film, for those of you who don't, I highly recommend it. One of my favorite films. I love the film Separation by Asghar Farhadi, and there is a pretty similar ending,
right,
in which something like we're the whole film is based on a certain perception of the events that happened that led to miscarriage of one of the characters, and by the end there's a totally different explanation of what really happened. And here I decided to because I love this film so much, and I felt, well, it's all about the same here, like something happened in the past, people cling on to certain truth about it, then by the end maybe we can play with it and tell, like, we don't necessarily know the truth. The truth is inconceivable. It's something that's beyond our reach as people, and obviously community needs the truth. It doesn't matter if the truth is true, but it needs a certain truth for itself in order to be legitimized as a community, right? To have something to cling on to have a myth, right? Even if it's a fake myth. So in a way, the community does exactly the same thing as our main character, who fakes something in order to feel stronger as a person. The community does the same thing with an accident. They construct a myth, a legend behind it. And suddenly, by the end, we might learn that we would probably never hear the real explanation of what really happened. And that's what Daniel realizes by the end of the film. That's what sort of reveals him. And he realizes there's no sinners, there's no, necessarily like bad people, good people. There are, bad choices, emotions, etc. And the only thing he can do is to go by himself and listen to his heart and run this funeral by the end of the film, regardless of the defiance.
Your lead actor Bartosz is an incredible screen presence, I have to say. Like, really just jumps off the screen, and he accomplishes a lot physically, at times seeming very frail, and then at other times seeming very strong, particularly in the fight scene at the end, where I'm just sort of floored by his dominance of a much bigger man in that fight. And I'm just, I mean, I what a gift to find an actor who can do all of that and deliver, obviously the performance that he gives. Can you talk about how you wrote that character, what you were looking for, and then how you found Bartosz to actually, take on the role?
Yeah, well, it was a hell of a journey, I must say, because we were finding this character. Like at first, to reveal a little bit of the kitchen, director's kitchen. In order to apply for Polish Institute to get the money, to get the funding, you have to disclose a dream cast, and we didn't know who will be the main character, so we had to give the commission the names, and the main actor was Tomasz Frankowski, who plays ultimately the other guy, Pincher.
Sure.
But at the beginning, we felt like, okay, this is Tomasz. He's a star in Poland. He's a great actor. So maybe, like, I asked him, can we put your name on the list? But once we get the funding, you have to be aware, I would love to run a regular casting. And he said, sure, fine, do it. And yeah, and for many months, we were kind of with Tomasz as the main character. And then Bartosz came, and he did something incredible. He did something incredible during the casting. I gave actors 300 selected young actors came for the audition, and I gave them 2 scenes each. One scene was to run a sermon in their own words, so it was improv. Run a sermon and sing something, a religious song, and convince me to some sort of a value. I wanted to sort of see how they react with the material, whether they are convincing, whether they would find their own way into stuff. And then the second scene was totally different. A streetwise character expressing anger towards the camera, as if the camera was their friend who had turned them in at the police station. So expressing anger, sorrow, the feeling of betrayal. And out of these 300 people that came, it was sort of half and half. Half of them was great at being criminals, and half of them was great at being priests. And me, myself, obviously, the basic approach would be to find somebody who would embody both greatly. And so that's something I was looking for. And suddenly Bartosz came, long hair, sweater, with a dog, totally. He would kill me. I called him like a 200% hipster look, and he did these 2 scenes, and he didn't succeed in any of them.
Really?
Totally. In neither. Yeah, it was amazing because thanks to his interpretation, I realized that this character is neither a criminal nor a priest. And he wasn't even trying to convey. He didn't know the script, but by his intuition, gut. And even though he looked totally different from what we've expected, well, obviously he was on my radar because he's super talented and he has the stage personality. He was frequently here in one of the best theaters in Poland, on stage, and people talked about it, his performances, etc. But he didn't have any yet big role in movies. And so my producers, Leszek, the producer, was pretty anxious when I told him, like, Bartosz is the best, and he said, like, this guy, he's thin, he's not a crook, he doesn't look like he's a hipster, man. Like you but we gave, I was kind of, I felt something, then he came again and again, and I started to talk with him a lot, and he made me realize that this character is a different somebody than I thought. This character is a man in the making. He is not fully made by the end of the script, but at least he learns a thing about himself. So it's like a gray material, which is less gray by the end of the film, but we're all the time we're in a gray area of a person that has a broken identity, because it was sort of frozen in time by the sentence he was serving, and a thing he did that unfortunately in a society like ours happens to be part of the identity. Once you do a crime, it becomes you, right? And the society, even you can try, no matter how hard you can try, the society will always help you. Will always remind you who you are because you did something in the past. So the past is always stuck, like glued to whatever you're doing. So that discovery led to a series of other discoveries within the script, and it laid the foundation for Daniel, who is a person with a dream, a person with a calling, and and discovers for himself that yes, life is worthy of living, maybe because there are people still wanting you to have you in their community, even if it's a fakery. So that was revealing, and yeah, and we were working on by the end of the when I was designing it with my scriptwriter and Bartosz, by the end of the film, I remember we had this beautiful big cardboard, and on it I drew like 27 different Daniels by the end of the film, because each of them sort of adds up to another one and another one, becoming a different version of and of the initial Daniel we started the film with.
It's really interesting you say that, because there have we got a couple of questions that really do want to explore the ending of the film and where he winds up. Let me just read a couple. Oh, this one is this first one is okay. For me, I was struck with a moral dilemma posed by Daniel, who, while an imposter, did good in the community, is simply, when discovered by the priest, thrown back in juvie. Was that part of your goal, to have us left with this dilemma? I love the film and haven't stopped thinking about it.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, obviously, I didn't want a comforting ending that would leave you too comfortable not to think about it. I'm pleased with people asking questions. I'd rather make films that spur people into ask questions rather than give answers. But yeah, with the arc of him coming back to the juvie, I wanted to sort of close the circle of his journey, and so it's much more made hopefully visible for the for and tangible for the viewer to realize that he discovered something about himself. He's different in the same place by the end of the film and at the beginning of the film. At the beginning of the film, he doesn't even have, I wouldn't say he is empty, but there's not much of a personality there. There's a calling, there's something really small and modest, but nothing in particular. By the end of the film, we have somebody with a certain type of, I don't know actually what exactly it is, but some sort of strength. He was able, the spiritual strength, but at the same time, something depressing, because he was trying something, and the reality told him this is not the way. So he's being rejected. He feels rejected. He doesn't know about the widow at the village who was actually eventually accepted by the community and ushered in during the mass, right? So he hasn't witnessed it. He doesn't know about it. This little miracle he was working on for the whole film.
Yeah.
Which is pretty heartbreaking, but yeah, that's how it is with reality, right? But what he's faced with is his past and the brother of the victim he killed by the end of the film, Bonus. So he fights Bonus, and by the end of the film, it's sort of like we have a broken character. We have a I wouldn't say broken, maybe it's too strong, but a fallen angel of some sorts. I would say a guy who decides to, yes, you wanted me to be a murderer. Here I am. I'm gonna kill this guy now. I will do it on purpose. Maybe I killed somebody in the past when I was 15 years old, and I wasn't totally conscious of whatever I'm doing, but now I'm gonna do it because you want me to at least be labeled in this reality, in this society, right? And there's one person who prevents it from happening, with Pincher, who saw him performing a mass, and he was changed by him. So not directly, but indirectly, Daniel sees a plan of hope in somebody else, and this comes back to him by the end of the film as sort of in a karmic way. And he's being reborn by the end of the film.
This other question that came in also about the ending from Scott reads, I found the ending very satisfying. I could see a parallel with Christ's crucifixion and the extrapolation of 3 days suffering and battling in hell before resurrection. So I felt that Daniel would come out of this okay. Was that ending always in the script? Was there a lot of trial and error to get to that ending? Can you share if there were other endings envisioned or shot? P.S. In English, there's a phrase, fake it till you make it, which seems to apply to your narrative, how Daniel will be a better person having falsely posed as a community spiritual leader.
Yes, that's the motto of Elizabeth Holmes. I saw the documentary lately, and that was her motto. So she was the Corpus Christi character, but who didn't succeed as well. So, but it's a different story, obviously. Yes, thank you, Scott, for this question. Yeah, well, while making this film, you feel the temptation of drawing comparisons and sort of connecting the dots with the Bible, and especially with the New Testament, because obviously in New Testament you have a person who comes into the community to change it and to spark some kind of a revolutionary movement by becoming down to earth, reaching out to those in help, reaching out to those rejected. So same things are being performed by Daniel in our script in this film. He reaches out to the widow who was rejected by the community. He's probably the first person to reach out to her since the accident. So yes, there's a lot of traces there that might lead to Jesus Christ figure. Knowing this, I didn't want to overplay it, so I would rather keep it as low as possible. But yes, by the end, like someone told me, oh, you Poles, you have to have this bloody cathartic, very Catholic endings all the time. Like if like the character has to go through a huge ordeal in order to understand something, otherwise it's not New Testament-ish. And yeah, there's a bit of, you know, there's something to it, definitely. I just felt it was also my input. We had different endings, especially the first draft of the script. I can now I can reveal it to you. The first draft of the script was totally different when it finished. It finishes with Daniel leaving the juvenile detention center. There was no bonus character. There was no confrontation with the victim's brother. Nothing of that. There was no victim's brother by the end. That was also something I've added. He was just leaving the juvenile detention center, and there was Martha, the girl from the village, waiting for him in the car. So he jumped in. They drew off into the sunset. But then there's an epilogue scene by the end where when he asks her to pull over by the you know, there's this church, and he asks her like, stop the car here, and she stops the car. He takes out the collar again, and he enters the church in which people are waiting for him. So the story goes on with him pretending in other areas of the country, right? So I felt it was, yes, I understood it, but it was, for me, it was too sweet. Maybe this bloody Catholic DNA in me called for some kind of a resurrection of the main character, or the sense of being reborn again. So that was the ending in the first draft I've gotten. Then we flirted with different endings.
The movie, right? Where each week he goes to a different town and solves their problems, dressed as
yeah, there's actually, you know, we obviously, you know, it's the reality, right? After the film was released in Toronto at Toronto Film Festival, some of people approached us and in order to acquire rights for the film, and they were actually eager to make you know, Corpus Christi the second and the third, because the story can go on, and it can be in and of itself an anecdotal arc for the main character to becoming a bishop. There was even the story of somebody faking it until he became a bishop in Spain, I guess it was Spain. 16 years of impersonating a priest led him to become a bishop, and nobody even checked his papers. So that was one of the shining examples. So, you know, young Pope, why not? You know, this like 3 seasons of young Pope with Jude Law. Maybe we can think of something here. There is actually a script, this TV series in made now based on Corpus Christi, the film.
Wow.
So made, I mean, made, it's too much. It's still in this process of now finding the head author, somebody who showrunner who will format the whole show and give the taste of.
But with the same character?
USA, I would say USA.
Okay. Wow.
USA, I would even say south of USA, closer to the Mexico border.
I'm seeing a hand up from Grant, and so Grant, I'm going to allow you to talk, and if you've got a question, just feel free to use your mic. Unless, of course, you raised your hand by accident, which I'm sure happens.
Maybe it's the cat.
Let's see. I don't know if I'm also like stopping his mic from working. Okay, well, Grant, you're welcome to jump in if you want to turn on your mic at some point. So there was actually something that I I wanted to ask if Joe wanted to jump in at all about to talk about the Lux Audience Award program in terms of, you know, how featuring a film like Corpus Christi really does help to expose audiences around the world to, you know, really the best of European cinema, and maybe give us some thoughts on how Lux achieves that, and, you know, what the process is in terms of getting to the 3 finalists that we have this year. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Your mic is you're not muted, but we're not getting sound from you.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. Well, hold on a sec. Joe, would you mind just trying? Oh, that is weird. No, we lost your audio.
Maybe the same thing happened with Grant.
Let me see if I mute and unmute you, that does anything. Okay. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know. You might have to reconnect your audio. But I mean, well then I'll kick that over to you, Jan, while Joseph is checking his audio. The film has obviously had an incredible run, including an Oscar nomination. And so, you know, now you know, the film has sort of like a second round of, or a third round of achievements and accolades, you know, with the Lux Audience Award. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are in terms of like a film like this getting seen around the world. You know, obviously the film had proper theatrical distribution in the United States, which is always critical and very hard to do for an international release. So just tell us about your experience sharing this film. And I guess, you know, particularly in the past year when it's been in such an unusual format.
Oh, thanks for I think Joe's mic is on. Yes. Is it?
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah. Okay. Hi, Joe.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. Well, what I'm going to say is going to be very disappointing because I'm not an expert really on the Lux Prize. I've seen. I mean, I have a broad understanding of the process, which is chosen. But I think our colleague Ryan Malak, who's on the line, would be more informed than me. But if I may, I mean, I think that, well, obviously the prize is going for the best kind of most meaningful art film in a sense, or professional film, provocative film, and I don't know, whatever the precise criteria are, I'm sure the Corpus Christi fulfills them because it's such a thought-provoking film. And I think because it's a European Union prize, it tries, I think it looks for subjects that appeal, that describe on one level a situation in one member state. In this case, it's Poland, and I wasn't able to follow all of the conversation, but I believe from what I read that part of the motivation behind the film is the symbolism around the Smolensk accident and the national trauma. I think that caused for Poland, which is somehow underlying its kind of undercurrent in the film. And last year we showed a Spanish political film. Sorry, last year it was a Danish film about the events in Congo, the case of Hammarskjöld and his plane being shot down, and the very interesting suggestion that other forces might have been at play, but it's and before that we had the Spanish film about this political situation in Andalusia, and you know how you deal with corruption when you get caught up in the web of corruption. And it's a theme that was very specifically Spanish, but at the same time was eloquent and could easily be related to by any audience in Europe. So if I look at Corpus Christi, I'm from Ireland, I was brought up, I'm no longer a Catholic, but I was totally, my education was totally Catholic, and I can relate to everything in your film. I can relate also to the poverty in the film. I can relate to the, because I come from sort of a fairly modest background, so I can also relate to the hardships that the people are suffering, and the bravery of the people, the country people, everything, and even the fantastic photography. I'm sorry if I'm rambling on a little bit, but one thing that I personally thought wonderful were I thought they were Fellini-esque landscapes, where the shot of the quiet village, and from what you've seen before the shot that so much is going on. So the landscape is almost talking to you. So it reminded me of some of Fellini's stuff, that. Anyway, I'm sorry for giving such an incoherent answer to Alex. I think I've broken all my own records, so talking in a circular way. But I think it's a long answer to say that I think it's the universality sort of anchored in a very specific place, in a very specific identity, a very specific aspect of Europe, which somehow is one side of the diamond. So just as the United States is a very multifaceted place, perhaps Europe is even more multifaceted, but somehow there's an underlying unity in all of this, and it's more than just the basic humanity. It's also maybe the shared experience, so that Catholicism in Ireland and Catholicism in Poland, they became so intertwined in the society also for political reasons. In Ireland, it was almost an expression of national identity. So as we lost our language, the Catholicism became the sort of the label or the way of expressing your individuality. And I think that's also part of the dynamic in Poland. It was also linked to identity. So the whole, everything about your film is a kind of interlocking wires that I could really plug in to any of them. So I'm really apologizing, Alex, and Jan for this kind of long-winded answer. But I thought it was wonderfully thought-provoking for me as an Irish person and as a European.
And you bring up a good point, which maybe could be a way to sort of end the conversation here. Is a lot of here in film school, there's a lot of analysis of film, particularly as being a product of a particular society at a particular time, sort of representing the identity of where it's from. And I'm curious, because that is such an academic thing, but sometimes it is very much the case where you can very much read a film narrative as an allegory for larger issues in the country. And so I am curious, Jan, when you were making this film, how much you would say this feels like specifically a story that comes out of Poland, as opposed to something that could be set in the United States, like the adaptation would be. What do you feel is its sort of identity in that sense?
Well, I think, and thank you, Joseph, for your words. It's really, it strikes the actually the core of whatever I'm thinking about, and not only the struggle of European nations to become to sort of put us in context of becoming one, or preserving the identities of each. It's gonna last forever, but it's great that we're talking and we're on the same sort of in the same realm, especially today when the new power dynamic in the world is sort of, I think, exercised. But lately we had G7 talking about it extensively. So, but especially now, I think European Union, with its unfortunately Brexit happened for many reasons, but we're still one, and I feel proud that during my lifetime I witnessed the collapse of, it was my early childhood, right? The collapse of one union, and being sort of becoming part, one with another union, right? So it's like going from one to another. It was a journey without basically moving. So, but yes, I think maybe that gives me the sense of flexibility and the changing of identity, and how important it is to recontextualize yourself, from time to time, with the changing identity. And the beautiful thing with European Union, I think, and Lux Prize as a reflection of it, is this, that we somehow we have to pay respect and to art and nurturing authors' cinema, because that's what for us, 26 now different nations, but basically talking about Europe much more, this is this is basically our reality. Like you make 100 or 230 300 kilometers and you trespass another boundary of another country, suddenly you're in a different reality. And it's so easy to change realities in Europe. I know in the United States, obviously it's sort of the same coming from state to state, but we have this daily. It's for us, it's how we live. It's totally jumping from one bucket to another. And that's why probably people feel more and more disgruntled and insecure. And these small communities, you can find them in Spain, in Andalusia, or in Ireland, or like maybe Lars von Trier showed this community in Breaking the Waves as well, very orthodox. And you have these communities in Scandinavia. Up north, you have these communities in the center of Europe, in Poland, small, feeling rejected by overall big urban, power oriented, very with strong media presence, cultures and communities as well. So that's why I felt the urge, and obviously in the United States, which comprises different small communities, right, that were pioneering 200 years ago, and then small towns aroused, with certain values and certain codes at the core of them, right? So I was pretty much inspired by this overall movement of, yes, we're together, we're small, we're together, and we don't let anybody in. But yes, there is a stranger, he might heal us. Do we want this? Do we want the treatment? Well, then we would have to destroy our myth as a communal experience. So in a way, also I'm rambling a little bit, but in a way I wanted to tell that within this small microcosm of Corpus Christi, I wanted to convey something bigger, something that's more relevant probably to any community in the world, United States included, and definitely in Europe. You'll find people, we see political movements arising from this certain feeling of rejection. Let's take Yellow Vests in France, small rural communities also disgruntled. Same thing happens in Poland, obviously. So I wanted to give a reflection of it in my film.
Well, thank you so much for sharing it with us and for really taking the time to elaborate on a lot of the really interesting nuance and creative decisions that you made. I think the film is exceptional. I'm so glad that we actually showed it on the big screen here last year. Sorry that we couldn't do that this time around, but it was a real pleasure. And I really hope that you'll come back and join us, with your next film or whenever you happen to be in LA.
Yes, hopefully that happens soon. I was actually planning, I was hoping G7 summit to give us a bit of, you know, lifting of the restrictions, but it didn't happen. Hopefully it will happen in a month or so I can fly over the Atlantic. But we will see. Hopefully, you know, we have now Europe is reopening, so I can connect with my friends from all around the place.
Thank you again, Jan. Thank you, Joseph, and thank you to the European Parliament for sponsoring the LUX Audience Award and for sponsoring this series that we've been doing now for 3 years. And I look forward to doing this back in a theater in 2022. And I hope, I hope that everyone stays safe and gets to go back out and explore the world as soon as the world allows us to.
Yes.
But,
and I just wanted to pinpoint that Grant still wants to say something.
Oh, Grant, this is your last chance. No? All right. You can email me. Thank you both again so much, and have a wonderful summer.
Thank you. Thank you.
You too.
Thanks, Jan.
Thanks
Thanks,
very
Alex.
much. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Alex. Thanks,
Thank you.
Brian. Thanks,
Bye.
Grant. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.